If you want to build a spreadsheet that is accurate and easy to use and does what you need it to do, you'll have to understand the basics of using Microsoft Excel. With the proper foundation of Excel knowledge, you'll know how to build your spreadsheets right the first time, know how to share them quickly, and even collaborate with others. I'm David Rivers, and I've been teaching people how to get the most out of Microsoft Excel since it came into existence. Join me as we explore how Excel in Microsoft 365 can help you work faster and easier as you create, edit, share, and collaborate on time-saving and attractive-looking spreadsheets. Well, here's what you need to know to follow along with me in this course. Firstly, I'm working with Excel using a Microsoft 365 business account. Because Excel is always being updated and improved, and because not all Microsoft 365 subscriptions are updated at the very same time, what you see on your screen may not always match exactly what appears on my screen. But not to worry, it shouldn't affect your ability to complete the tasks we'll be performing. Now, this course comes with exercise files, a copy of the same files you'll see me working with on my computer. If you have access to them and want to follow along with me step by step, download them to a convenient location such as your desktop. We'll take a closer look once we get started shortly. And lastly, this course is tailored to those who have never used any version of Microsoft Excel or are new to this latest rendition of Excel in Microsoft 365. So you won't need any experience with Excel to follow along with ease as we move through the chapters and movies in this course. Just before we start using the Microsoft 365 version of Excel to create great-looking spreadsheets, you need to know what Excel is and why you would use it. Well, by definition, Excel is an electronic spreadsheet program. In other words, Excel is a software application that is used for the storing, organization, and the manipulation of data. Now, that data is entered into cells, which are organized into columns and rows. And that data can be either text, numbers, or formulas and functions. In Excel, a formula or function will typically be used to run calculations on data that is found in other cells. So, who uses Excel and what for? Well, quite often Excel is used by those who work with financial data. Excel will be used to perform basic mathematical operations like totaling up columns or rows of data. It'll be used to find values such as profits or losses, or even the maximum or minimum values in a specified range of data. Other useful calculations include finding averages, number counts, and percentages. But performing calculations in Excel is only the tip of the iceberg. Excel is also often used to chart or graph data to make it easier for users to identify trends. And many continue to use Excel like a database program because it includes functionality that makes it easy to sort and even filter data to find specific information. Excel also comes with many analytical tools to make analyzing data easy, such as pivot tables that allow you to view data from different perspectives. And that's what Excel in Microsoft 365 is in a nutshell, and what it can be used for. Now it's time to create your first spreadsheet and get comfortable in your surroundings. We'll do that next. Well, it's time now to launch Microsoft Excel in Microsoft 365 and start building our very first workbook. To do that, you'll need to access the app either from a shortcut you might see on your desktop or from the Windows taskbar, which could be across the bottom of your screen or down the left-hand side. It might be hidden or collapsed like mine, which appears over here on the left-hand side. I have a shortcut to Excel. I can click right here to launch the app. If you don't see it, you can always use the search button up here near the top. Just type in Excel and you'll find the app to launch. Once we click it, though, to launch the app, Excel is automatically going to take us directly to our home screen. You'll see home up here in the top left corner with a bar down the left to indicate that's what we're looking at over here in the main area. Here from the home screen, we can create new workbooks like blank ones or others using different templates if we wanted to. We can access more templates from here. Also from the home screen, we can access files or workbooks we've already created from a recent list. If this is your first time, like me, opening up Excel, you won't have a recent list, but Excel does keep track of the workbooks you've been working with, so you can access them quickly from here. You can also pin workbooks that you work with on a regular basis. Going to the pinned category will list all of those so you can access them quickly, and any that are shared with you will also show up on the shared with me list. Also down the left, though, you can see we can go to New to create new workbooks. This just gives us access to more templates. You'll see them listed here. You'll also see a search field for searching for templates. For example, if you wanted to look at business-related templates, you can click Business down below or just type it in the search field. If you want to narrow it down to maybe budget-related business workbooks, you could type in Budget. And when you press Enter or Return on your keyboard, you'll see a filtered list of templates that will help you achieve a nice head start in creating that type of workbook. You can also open existing workbooks by clicking Open over here on the left. This will just give you access to more locations. For example, you might be working with OneDrive in your organization, OneDrive for Business, or have SharePoint sites. Your own personal OneDrive might appear on this list, and you'll have access to your PC. You can add places and use Browse to look through any of those locations. What you see here on your list will look different from mine depending on your organization and what you have access to personally. But we're going to go back to Home up here in the top left corner because we are going to start from scratch with a blank workbook. Go ahead and click there. This starts a brand new blank workbook. You can see a number of columns and rows, all empty, waiting for our input. Also important, across the top on the title bar, you'll see a quick access toolbar for automatically saving. There's undo and redo. We'll get to those a little bit later. There's also a search field for searching for content in your workbook. But more importantly, over here on the right-hand side is where you'll confirm that you're logged into your Microsoft 365 account. You'll see your name. You might see a profile picture here, or if not, your initials. And this is where we go to access our account if we need to. Throughout this course, I'll be using the name Judson Phillips, who works for a fictitious company, the Globe Bank Inc. So we'll keep that in mind. Logged into your account gives you access to all of the features and functionality you have with your membership. So down below where we see our ribbon and the various tabs for the ribbon, we also see below the grid, and this is where we do our work. Every column and row makes up a cell address. If you were to click anywhere in the middle of the screen, you'll see a highlighted marker at the top for your column, as well as a row marker that's highlighted over here on the left. This creates the cell address. So J11 for me is the cell I'm looking at, and I can be reminded of that here in the top left corner. You'll see in the name box J11. So you'll always know where you are. The very top left corner is cell A1. Now, you may only see a limited number of columns. I can see up to column S and down to row 21. Depending on your zoom level, you might see a different set of columns and rows. But just so you know, the amount of space you have to work with is phenomenal. There are over 1 million rows to work with and over 16,000 columns to work with. Once you get to Z, it starts over at AA, AB, and so on. So lots of space, and that's all just on one single sheet. You'll also notice down at the bottom a tab labeled Sheet 1. We can add as many sheets as we need, all with over 1 million rows and over 16,000 columns. You might want multiple sheets for the various months in a year, for example, or the quarters. You can also right-click a tab down below like Sheet 2. Go ahead if you're following along, and from the pop-up menu, delete a sheet. This one's empty, so we're not losing anything by deleting it. We're going to start with a single sheet, which we can rename. We'll do that a little bit later as well. Right now, we're ready to start inputting content, which can be text, it could be numbers, or it could be calculations. In other words, formulas and functions to work with those numbers. We're going to start with text next. So we've started our blank workbook here in Excel, and now it's time to start adding content. We know that that can be one of three things: text, or numbers, or calculations, which will be formulas and functions. In this movie, we'll focus on adding text, which we might need for things like titles and labels. But because we work with a spreadsheet that has columns and rows, the text we add is going to behave differently than we might be used to, say, using a word processor. Because we have columns, in this case with a new blank workbook, all of equal width, we need to understand how text behaves in those cells. We're going to start right up here in cell A1 and type in a title. We're going to type in the name of our company, Globe Bank, and you can see what's happening. We're overlapping now into column B because column A is not wide enough, but we'll keep typing just to see what happens. We'll add ink, leave a space, a dash, another space, and we'll type in projected revenues 2025, and then we'll leave a space. In brackets we'll put USD so we know everything we see here is in US dollars. Now press enter on your keyboard or return, and you'll notice that we're able to see all of the contents of cell A1 overlapping into columns B, C, D, and even right into E. That doesn't mean there's content in those cells. Go back to cell A1 and click there. When we add content to a workbook like this, you'll notice just above the markers for all of the different columns, an area called the formula bar. This is where we can work on formulas and so on. We can also work on our text. And you'll notice that in cell A1, even though the column's not wide enough, we can see all of this content. Why is that? That's because the cells in B1, C1, D1, and E1 are empty. Each of those cells has nothing in them, so Excel is going to display the contents of cell A1 right across them. If we were to go into any of these cells and add content, our text would get cut off. It'd still be there. We just wouldn't be able to see it. We'd have to do something like widen the column, things we'll talk about a little bit later. For now, we can see everything because those cells are empty. Let's continue adding some content. Let's go down to cell A3. Click there, column A, row 3, and we'll type in a label, location. You can press enter, and we'll start adding some locations like USA. Each time you press enter, it takes you down to the next row. Let's type in India. We'll press enter, add a couple more like Europe and Canada. All right, let's skip a row. We'll go down to cell A9 and type in totals. And we'll put a colon at the end there and press enter. Now, you can see by default, all of the content is visible because there's nothing in those other cells, and it actually fits. These are short enough to fit the default width of each column. That's good. Everything's lined up in the left-hand side of the cell by default, things we can adjust if we want to, but just so you know, that's how they're aligned by default. And if you click in any one of these, like cell A4, and go up to the ribbon with the Home tab selected, move over to the alignment group, you'll see that highlighted up here at the top is bottom align. So by default, any text we add to a cell is lined up at the bottom of the cell. This would be more apparent if we had taller rows, but in this case, we can tell right from here on the ribbon that by default, everything's lined up on the left and at the bottom of the cell. Let's add a couple more labels here. We're going to go over to cell C3. And let's type in the short form for January, Jan. Use your tab key now on the keyboard. That'll move you to the right. Instead of going down, we can tab over across to cell D3. Everything in C3 is saved. We'll type in Feb, hit your tab key, and the short form of March is MAR. Now you can press enter. You can see how it wraps you around down to the next row under January where we started. So we have our text in here. It looks like all we need now is to add some numbers. Before we do that, we should save our changes. Let's go up to the quick access toolbar. You'll see the save button. Kind of looks like a floppy disk. Control S is the keyboard shortcut on a Windows PC. It's Command S if you're on a Mac. But we can click this to save what we've done so far. You can see by default, Excel is going to give it a name, Book 1 if it's your first workbook that you're creating. You'll see book and a number if it's a second or third. And then down below, we get to choose a location. Let's start with the name. Because book 1 is already highlighted, we could call this whatever we want. For example, let's type in Globe Bank. I'm capitalizing the G and the B. and then I'm going to add PR as in projected revenues. Now we can go to the location dropdown. It's a button we can click to go to other locations, for example, documents or right on the desktop. I'm going to go to desktop here and click Save. You can do the same, and you'll notice now up here on the title bar we see the new name and that it's saved to this PC. So all of our text is in there and saved up. We're ready to add some numbers, and we'll do that next. Now that we've added all the text we need to our new workbook, it's time to think about the next type of data we can add to a sheet, and that is numbers. Numbers will behave differently than text, so let's add them to our Globe Bank projected revenues sheet here that we started previously. If you jump to this movie or need to get caught up, you can go to the Chapter 1 folder of your exercise files and open up Globe Bank PR0104, and you'll have what I have. Let's start right here in cell C4. That's under January to the right of the USA. And let's say the numbers that we're going to add here are US dollars, yes, according to our title, but maybe in millions of dollars. Well, in that case, we might want to be clear in our title. So let's go back up. You might be tempted to add in millions here at the end of USD by clicking in column E, but remember, there's nothing there. We're just seeing all of the contents of cell A1 overlapping into those empty cells. So let's go to cell A1. And to do the editing, we'll go up to the formula bar, click after the D in USD, leave a space, and just type in millions like so. Now you can press enter. Okay, now back to cell C4 under January to the right of USA, and we'll start typing in some numbers like 4.031. Hit your tab key for February, and we'll type in 2.99. Hit your tab key and type in 3.02. When you press enter now or return on your keyboard, notice it takes you back around under January on the next row next to India. And here we can continue to type in additional numbers. Let's get the rest of them in. After entering that last number for Canada under March, pressing enter or return wraps us around to the next row, which is blank under January. And we're ready now to start adding the third type of data, the formulas or functions. That is, the calculations we're going to be performing on these numbers. The first total, according to our label here, will appear in cell C9. So we can click there and get ready to add our first formula. Well, we've been building our brand new workbook here in Excel, and so far we've added two different types of data. Text, as in our title and the labels we see. We've also now added numbers, and it's time to run calculations on those numbers. In other words, get the totals for Jan, Feb, and Mar, and that means adding a formula or function. And that's what we're going to explore in this movie as we continue working with our Globe Bank projected revenues workbook, Globe Bank PR0105 from the Chapter 1 folder of your exercise files if you need to get caught up. We're here in cell C9. That's where our first formula is going to go, and we want to total up all of the numbers that we see under January for each of our locations. So there's a number of different ways to do this. One way that is not the right way, but you might be tempted, is to simply type in these numbers with plus signs to add them up, and you would get the right answer. But if you went in here and changed any of these numbers, you'd have to change it in the formula as well. Let's explore that. Every formula, whether it's a function or a manual formula you're going to add yourself, starts with an equal sign. Remember that. Might come in handy. Equals, and then we know that we're starting a formula. So if you wanted to, you could type in 4.031, add a plus sign, 3.115, and continue on. And when you press enter, you get the right answer. Let's see what happens. Plus 2.62, plus 1.908, and press enter. There's the answer, totaled up for us nicely. Click in cell C9 again to see that we're viewing the results here on the sheet in the formula bars where we see the actual formula. But if we went in here and changed one of these numbers, like Europe should be 3.62, we'd still see the same total because it's using 2.62 in the formula. We really don't want this. All you need to do is click the cell C9 and hit your delete key to remove the contents. Now with a blank cell, we can do something else. Again, we'll start with the equal sign. That's always how we start a formula. But this time, we're going to type in the cell addresses, not the contents of the cell. So what we want is C4, we'll type that in, plus, you can see as we start adding these cell addresses, they get highlighted. If you wanted to, you could type in C5, or even better, just click it. Notice it shows up down below and in the formula bar. Add a plus sign. Click 2.62, which is C6, plus. And you could click C7 or type in C7. Either way, you're going to get all of the cell addresses we want to total up, press enter, and you get that same answer. But when we click there and look at the formula bar, it's just taking the contents of cells and adding them up. That means if we go to Europe now, just click there and type 3.62, what it should have been, 3.62, and press enter. You can see the total automatically updates for us because it's taking the contents of cells, not the actual values. Very nice. There is a better way, though, a faster way. Go back here to cell C9 and hit your delete key on the keyboard to remove the contents. We'll start with an equal sign, and a function is a pre-made formula that we can use. Imagine if we had hundreds of rows. We wouldn't want to be typing in cell addresses or clicking them and plus signs. Instead, we would use a function. And in this case, we're going to look at the sum function. When you start to type in sum, you're going to see a drop-down list of a number of different functions. The top one highlighted is sum, and you can see a description, adds all the numbers in a range of cells. So now all we need is the range. A range will go inside round brackets. So we start with a round bracket, the left bracket. The range is actually, if you look up above, C4 to C7. So we could type that in, C4, a colon, and C7. Notice how the range gets selected here up above, and that means we're done. We can close it up with the closing round bracket, the right bracket, and press enter. There's our total. And when we go back to cell C9 and look at the formula bar, we're using a function this time, not a number of cell addresses and plus signs. That's very handy when you have multiple rows and you don't want to type all that cell addressing in. There is another way. Hit your delete key to remove that formula. Let's start a new one with an equal sign. We'll do sum again and the open round bracket, but instead of typing in the range, let's just select the numbers by clicking and dragging from C4 down to C7. Notice it writes it for us down below. We can close it up now with that closing round bracket and press enter. There's our answer. That was very quick. But believe it or not, there's a faster way even. Go back up to cell C9 and hit your delete key on the keyboard to remove that. There's something called auto sum, and it's automatically going to look for numbers and total them up. We access it from the formulas ribbon. So click the formulas tab up here, and you'll see over here in the function library to the left, there's something called auto sum. And when we click the drop down, you'll see other auto formulas for averages, for counting up numbers, finding maximum or minimum numbers. But AutoSum is the one we want. And all it's going to do is look for a range of numbers. It's going to look to the left, to the right. It's going to look down, and it's going to look up as well. It's going to look up at the cells above where we are and see if there's a range of numbers that it can total up for us. So let's do that. We'll click it. And sure enough, you can see it writes the formula, sum C4 to C8. It does include this blank cell because row 8 is empty. It's included, but it stops up here at row 3 because it runs into some text. So if we wanted to, we could change that just by clicking after the 8. We could backspace that and type in a 7 and just press enter. That's a fast way to total up numbers. So AutoSum can be found, remember, on the Formulas ribbon here to the left-hand side. All right, when we go back to cell C9 and look at the formula bar, we have our sum function that was written from AutoSum using the range of cells above. All we need to do now is do the same thing for February and March. We're not going to recreate the formulas or functions. Instead, wouldn't it be nice if we could just copy what we did already and paste it to those other columns? Well, we can thanks to something called relative cell addressing, and we're going to explore that next. Now that we've added our first formula or function to our brand new workbook, it's time to take that formula and copy it to the other cells where it's needed. That's the time saver so that we don't have to re-enter formulas for every single column or row where we need them. That's what we're going to explore with our Globe Bank Projected Revenues Workbook, Globe Bank PR0106 from the Chapter 1 folder of your exercise files if you're catching up. We want to take the formula here in cell C9 and recreate it in D and E9 as well. So let's see what happens when we go to C9, click the Home tab on your ribbon, and go here to Copy. You could also use the keyboard shortcut Control-C on a Windows PC or Command-C on a Mac computer. But clicking this is going to highlight with the marching ants marquee that we see around the cell to remind us that that has been copied. Now we're going to go to the cell where we want to paste it. Let's go to the next one over in D9, and we could click the paste button or use the keyboard shortcut Control-V on a Windows PC, Command-V on a Mac. When you do that, you're going to notice a number appear in that cell. And it's different from the total we see in column C. And if we look up here in the formula bar, it knows automatically to use the numbers in column D, not the ones from column C. That's relative cell addressing. So if we go to cell E9 and paste there, sure enough, we get a different total, and the formula is rewritten to use the numbers in column E. Relative cell addressing is automatically looking at the formula that we copied and the data that it's using in that calculation and using the relative cell addressing to use the appropriate numbers in each column. Relative cell addressing is a huge time saver, so we don't have to recreate formulas and functions in multiple cells. So now that we have everything we need, we can press the Escape key on the keyboard. We're no longer needing to have that copied to the clipboard. We have all of our answers. Now, there is another way to get data filling up cells. It's called autofill, and we're going to explore that next. When it comes to populating your workbooks here in Excel for Microsoft 365, there are a number of shortcuts to help save you some time and effort. One of the most popular ones is called autofill. It's what we're going to explore in this movie as we continue working with our Globe Bank Projected Revenues Workbook, Globe Bank PR0107. Open that up from the Chapter 1 folder of your exercise files if you don't feel like adding all of the numbers I've added here for you. That'll get you all caught up. And now we're going to look at some shortcuts for filling in content. When it comes to these numbers, we had to type those in manually because all of them are different. But Excel's good at picking up patterns and automatically filling cells for you. We're going to experiment first. Let's just go down below here somewhere, such as here in cell H12. And let's type in Monday. Press Enter and type in Tuesday. Press Enter. So we see a pattern here, the days of the week. Excel also sees that pattern. So if we want to automatically fill in the rest, we can click and drag over Monday and Tuesday. That's H12 to 13. And notice a little handle that appears in the bottom right corner of the selected cells. When you move your mouse over it, you see the pointer change to that little black crosshair. That means you can now click and drag it. So hold down your mouse button, drag straight down. You'll see little tooltips popping up showing you what's going to go in those cells. We can go all the way till we see Sunday and release. That's a lot faster than having to type those in. All right, press your Delete key on the keyboard to remove that content. And let's go up to the same cell, H12, type in the short form for Monday. This time tab over, type in TUE. There's another pattern, but with short forms. And we can click and drag to the right if we wanted to. Select those two cells. This time it's H12 and I12. You'll see that same handle in the bottom right corner. You can now click and drag it across until you see all of the days of the week. If you keep going, it'll start over at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but we just want to go to Sunday and release. That's autofill in action, picking up on patterns. Press your delete key. It also works with numbers. For example, if we wanted to type in 2020, hit your tab key, type in 2021. You can see the pattern there. These might be labels for years. Click and drag over those two and drag to the right, and you'll see we can go all the way to 2025 if we wanted to, and beyond. Let's delete that with our delete key on the keyboard. We do have some content we can use autofill with. We have Jan, Feb, and Mar. These are the months of Q1. We'll click and drag over these because now we have data for the rest of the months. And there's that little handle at the bottom right corner. Let's click and drag it across until we see the little tooltip show us DEC and release. That's much faster than typing it in ourselves. Click in the background anywhere to deselect, and you can see how good that looks. Nice and easy. There's some formatting to do still, but at least we got it all in there quickly and efficiently. And we can do it with copying formulas. We did copying and pasting of the formula. We started here in cell C9, but we could go to cell E9. It has that little handle. Click and drag from it all the way across, and it's going to copy and paste that formula in the other cells and use that relative cell addressing we talked about in the previous movie. Autofill is a huge time saver. Anytime you see that handle in the bottom right corner, it can be used to copy and paste, but also pick up on patterns and fill cells for you so you don't have to do it yourself. If you've been following along, you know how handy relative cell addressing can be when copying formulas from one cell to another. We used it here for our totals, automatically copying a formula across the bottom row here, and it knows to automatically take the numbers above. But there will be times when you don't want relative cell addressing to happen. That's what we're going to explore right now with our Globe Bank Projected Revenues Workbook, Globe Bank PR 0108 if you want to catch up. Let's click here in cell A10, and we're going to type something in, taxes, and a colon. Now you can go up here to cell J1, and this is where we're going to add the text or label for our tax rate that we're going to use to calculate the taxes. So let's type in tax rate and a colon. Hit your tab key. In K1 is where we'll type in the actual rate, which is 15%. So let's type in 0.15. We'll worry about formatting in the next chapter. As you can see, our text is lined up on the left, our numbers on the right, some with 3 decimal places, some with 2 or 1. Formatting can be taken care of once we get everything in here the way we want it. And for now, that means calculating the taxes for each of the months and under each of these locations. So let's go to cell C10. Here's where we want to calculate this tax rate times the total. So in cell C10, we start with, you got it, the equal sign. That tells Excel we're starting a formula. We can click the cell that we want to use in the calculation. Just go ahead and click cell C9. You can see it's highlighted with the marching ants marquee. And now we want to multiply that. We know that the plus sign is used for adding numbers. To multiply numbers, we use the asterisk. To divide, we use the slash. But we want to multiply C9 by the tax rate up here in K1. And we can click it now that we've added the asterisk. So you can see here in the formula bar, it's going to be C9 times K1. Press enter, and there's the answer, 1.9. Now, we know that we can click that cell, go to the handle in the bottom right corner, and click and drag it across to copy that from one cell to the other cells. It's a great time saver, but we also know that it uses relative cell addressing. That means that what we do here in cell C10 and copy to D10 is going to use this value here in D9 times, well, it's actually going to move over one column to the right since we're copying the formula one column to the right, and there's nothing there. Let's prove that by going to the handle in the bottom right corner. When you see the black crosshair, click and drag straight across all the way to column N under December. You can see we get a lot of zeros. So if we go to cell C10, we see it's C9 times K1. If we go to the next cell, D10, we see it's D9 times L1, and there's nothing in L1. Next one uses M1, and so on. So what we really want to do is take the relative number, the total above the formula, but stay focused on the column K. So that means using relative cell addressing for the first part, but absolute addressing for the second part of our formula. All right, so let's go back to cell C10. We have C9, that's great, just the way we want. And when we copy it to column D, we want to use D9 and E9 and so on, but we want to stay focused on K1. To do that, to make this absolute, we add a character. Click in front of the K and type in the $sign. That's going to stay focused on column K. Now, if we were copying this down rows, it would try to use the rows below K1. We don't want that either. So we might as well add the $sign between the K and before the 1. Go ahead and do that and press enter. Doesn't affect the answer here. You can see our taxes total is C9 times K1. But now when we go to that handle in the bottom right corner and click and drag it all the way across to column N and release, we now get values in those cells. Go over to cell D10 and see, sure enough, it's using the total in D9 times the value in K1 because we made it absolute. There will be times when you need to focus on a certain cell and relative cell addressing won't work. In those cases, use the $sign for the column or the row, or like we did for both, to make that address absolute. All right, so we have all of our data in here. It doesn't look great. There's a lot of formatting we can do with text and with numbers. That's what we're going to cover in the next chapter. Once you've added all your data to a sheet in an Excel workbook like we have, it's time to make it more pleasing to the eye, maybe easier to understand by applying some formatting. We can format the text that we see here in our sheet, and of course, we can also format the numbers and the results from those formulas. We're going to focus on the text in this movie as we continue working with our Globe Bank Projected Revenues Workbook, Globe Bank PR 0201 from the Chapter 2 folder of your exercise files if you need to get caught up. Let's start right up here in cell A1. When we click there, we see the beginnings of the title, Globe Bank, Inc., Projected Revenues. But if we look at the formula bar, we remember everything is actually in that one cell. We only see the rest of it overlapping the empty cells in columns B through F. So all we need to do is format that one cell. We don't need to format all these other cells because there's nothing in them. Everything resides in cell A1. With it selected, we're ready to make some changes to our title, and we're going to do it from the ribbon with the Home tab selected in this font group. First, we're going to change up the font itself. You'll see the current font and size displayed here. Yours might be different. You may have different defaults. But let's click the drop-down for the font itself and choose one that we know everyone's going to have. You can see it's quite a long alphabetical list, but as we scroll down, eventually we're going to see Arial. Let's select it. Notice as we hover over these in the background, we can see those changes being applied to our title. But we want Arial, not Arial Black, so let's give it a click. Already it looks a little bit different. It looks a little bit bigger and a little bit different in the way that it fills up the cells. Let's go now to the bold button and click bold. You can see it's really standing out now. We can change the size. Click the drop down where we see the current default, mine set at 11. And as you hover over these different sizes, you'll see a real-time preview in the background so you know exactly what you're about to get. When we get too big, let's go down to like 18, for example. You're going to notice the row height increasing to accommodate that new height. But look what else happens. Off to the right at column J where we've added the label tax rate, our title's getting cut off. So we no longer see the entire title because there's something in cell J1. So it's still there, it's just that we can't see it. Let's go back up to 16 and 14 is actually going to work. We'll choose 14 and that looks different. It's already looking more attractive. How about color? We can change that too. You'll notice a color drop down. From here we have different theme colors across the top. You can hover over those to see a real-time preview. And then we have shades of those theme colors below. We also have the standard colors. And if you still don't see what you want, there's more colors where we can choose from different things like color wheels and so on. Thousands of colors to choose from. But I'm thinking a nice dark blue might be good. Yeah, I think this one here, dark blue, text to lighter 25%. As you hover over that, you see the tooltip and the real-time preview in the background. Go ahead and click that. Looks good. Let's go to tax rate. That's in cell J1. Click there, and maybe let's bold that. And over here for totals and taxes, those should be bolded as well. We can click and drag over multiple cells to format them all at once. With both cells, A9 and A10 selected, click bold. You can use the keyboard shortcut too, Control B on a Windows PC, Command B on your Mac computer. And I'm thinking now location and all of the short forms for each of the months should also be formatted. Let's go to the marker for row 3 and click there. Notice it selects the entire row. Same thing would happen with column markers. We want everything in this row formatted the same way. We're going to go to bold, and that looks pretty good. Click in the background to deselect. Nice and fast. I'm thinking now that the actual locations, USA all the way to Canada, we can click and drag over those 4 and maybe make them italics. That's Control I on a Windows PC, Command I on your Mac. Click in the background to deselect. So this is already looking more attractive. I do see some issues with our text up here for our labels for each of the months being lined up on the left versus the numbers on the right. So let's change the alignment for January through December by clicking and dragging from C3 all the way to N3. With those selected, we can go to the alignment group up here on the ribbon and change the alignment to center. When you click it, you can see how everything shifts over. Maybe right align would be better. That looks okay, but let's go back to center. We'll click it. I think that's going to work because when we deselect and see that things are lining up a little bit better, we now need to think about formatting our numbers. We can format their alignments. We can also change the way they're displayed. In every case here, we're looking at dollar amounts or currency, so these are things we need to consider as we move into the next movie and format our numbers. Just as we can format text on a worksheet here in an Excel workbook using Microsoft 365, we can also apply formatting to the numerical data, not only to make it more pleasing to the eye, but also perhaps make it easier to read and understand. That's what we're going to explore in this movie. We're going to do it with our Globe Bank Inc. Projected Revenues 2025 workbook, Globe Bank PR 0202, if you're catching up. And we're going to start right up here in cell K1. Go ahead and click there on the tax rate, which we entered as 0.15, knowing that's a 15% tax rate. It might make sense if it was displayed as a percentage. Well, with the Home tab selected here above the ribbon, you can see there is a number group. And currently, the format applied by default is just a general number format. Click the drop-down to see some other options. These are presets we can choose from. You can see currency and accounting, some date formatting as well as time, and there's one, percentage. Go ahead and select it. You can see right away 0.15 becomes 15%. So it shows up here in the formula bar. Now, another option is to go right to the number group here on the ribbon and click the percent button. It's another style of percentage. Go ahead and click it. You can see it uses 0 decimal places. The other had 2 decimal places. I think I like that one better. And just as we could change the alignment of our text, we can do that with numbers too. Let's go to the alignment group. This might look better if it was up against our tax rate. So let's go up here to the left align button and click there to bring it over to the left side of the cell. It's still a percentage, it's just lined up in a different location. I like that better as well. And if we wanted to, we could bold it just like we see with the tax rate label. So let's click the bold button and click anywhere else to deselect that cell to see what it looks like. I like that. All right, now we have a number of different values showing up under each of the months, our totals and our taxes. All of these numbers are actual numbers or currency. These are dollar amounts and should all be formatted the same way. So to save time, we're going to select all of our numerical data from cell C4, click there and drag across and down to cell N 10. That selects all of the numbers. Currently, they're all lined up on the right, but some have 1 decimal place, some 2, some 3. They should all have the same decimal places, and they should all have the same formatting. In our case, dollar signs or currency formatting. So with our data selected, we'll go up to the drop down here, and let's try currency. Go ahead and click it. You can see some things happen here. First of all, dollar signs appear next to the first number, and every single one of these values has 2 decimal places. The display is rounded up or down. The contents remain the same. There is another option that's very similar to this. Go up to the drop-down that shows currency now, click there, and choose accounting. This also uses a dollar sign, but it's over on the left side of the cell, and all of our numbers are 2 decimal places. Click in the background to get a really good look at the end result. I kind of like that. It's nice and clean. If you go to cell C4 and click there, you'll see the value is still 4.031. It's just being displayed as 4.03. It's this value, 031, that's being used in the calculation for the totals. So although we're changing the appearance, we're not changing the values themselves. Let's select that range again from C4 across and down to N10 and play with the decimal places. We got 2 by default here, but you'll notice some buttons here to increase or decrease the number of decimals. If we wanted more, we click the increase decimal. You can see it's bumped up. Click the decrease decimal button right next to it to go back to 2 decimal places. Click again to bring it down to 1. It's even further rounded up or down. I kind of like that clean look. Let's click in the background to see. Yeah, looks much nicer, much easier to read, more pleasing to the eye. Again, if we go to any one of these cells and click, we'll see the actual value in that cell versus what is displayed. 3.051 becomes 3.1 in the display. All right, I think that looks much nicer than it did when we started. It's always a good idea to get all of your data, including text, numbers, and formulas, and do the formatting after so you actually have something to work with and you're not guessing at what the final look will be. I like what we have. We're ready to move on. When building your workbooks here in Excel, it's important that they look their best and are easy to read, especially if you plan on sharing them with others, which is something we will be doing later on in this course. One thing we can do to make sure that everything is readable, well organized, and pleasing to the eye is to manipulate columns and rows. There's some formatting options that will help with that. In this movie, we'll focus on columns as we continue working with our Globe Bank Inc. Projected Revenues workbook, Globe Bank PR 0203 if you're catching up. First thing I notice with regard to columns is we left this column B empty or blank to create space between our labels and the data. That looks good, but it's not best practice. Even better would be to take out any blank columns and create the extra space by changing column widths. That's what we're going to do. That way you don't accidentally get empty cells included in some of the functions like AutoSum that we used earlier when calculating the totals at the bottom. So let's go up to column B and click right on the B. Notice the entire column is selected all the way down over 1 million rows. Well, we're going to remove that knowing full well that there's nothing in there, so we won't lose any data. To delete it, we have a couple of options. We can go up to the ribbon with the Home tab selected, move over to the Cells group here, and click the drop-down arrow next to Delete. You can see options for deleting cells, and then we see Delete Sheet Columns. Because we have a column selected, we could even delete the entire sheet if we wanted to. Clicking Delete Sheet Columns will remove that column. The other shortcut would be to right-click, and from here you could choose Delete, but we're not going to do that. We're going to leave everything as is, and notice that things are cramped on the left-hand side now, and our title, just click in cell A1, is getting cut off. Because we have one less column, the contents of I1, our tax rate label, is kind of overlapping the rest of our title, so it's getting cut off. We also want to create that extra space here, and to do that, we'll widen column A, and there's a couple of different ways to do that. The fastest way to widen a column or make sure that the column is wide enough to fit The biggest or widest entry is to go between the markers. So after A, when you get in between A and B, you'll see your mouse pointer change to a double arrow pointing left and right. Double click. That automatically widens column A to the widest entry, which is our title, and that's too wide. We have too much space now, and we do have empty cells where our title could overlap, so we don't really need to have it that wide. Another way is to go to that marker right in between A and B. When you see the double arrow, click and drag to create your own width. You can see there's a tooltip showing you the width as you click and drag. So if we brought it all the way over to around the P and projected, you can see the width there is around 23 or 167 pixels. Let go there and look at the extra space. Look at the title. It all fits in there. It's not getting cut off and everything looks pretty good. All right, another option is to manually set column widths. For example, if we want to set the column widths for all of the columns containing our data from B to M, we can click in the marker for B, drag all the way across to M to select all of those columns. And now go up to the Format dropdown. You'll see some options for setting the column width, automatically fitting column width. That's what we did when we double-clicked between the markers. It'll automatically look at the contents of every column and make it wide enough to fit the widest entry. So let's try that and see what happens. Everything gets squished together here. Our title's now getting cut off. That's because we have a little less space in each column. Column I looks wider than the rest. That's because there's a label in there, tax rate, so it's as wide as that entry, and it doesn't look uniform. So we'll go up here to the undo button. You could also use the keyboard shortcut Control-Z on a Windows PC, Command-Z on a Mac, and spread it back out to what we started with our blank workbook. Now let's go up to Format, click the drop-down, and choose Column Width. Here's where we can type in values if we wanted to. For example, let's try 10 and click OK. You can see it spreads things out a little bit too much. So let's go back to the Format dropdown, click Column Width, and try something like 8 and click OK. So that's narrower than what we started with, which was near 8.5. Everything fits nicely. It's not as spread out as it was before, and we can still see our title. Click in the background anywhere to deselect, and you can see that looks much better. It's more pleasing to the eye, it's easier to read, and all thanks to a few adjustments using column formatting. The other thing we can do is make adjustments to rows. We'll talk about that next. Just as we can manipulate columns to create extra space and make our workbooks more pleasing to the eye and easier to read, we can also manipulate rows to do the same. And that's what we're going to explore in this movie, continuing with our Globe Banking Projected Revenues Workbook, Globe Bank PR 0204 if you're catching up. We do have a couple of empty rows. Row 2 and row 8 are currently empty. We did that to create the extra space, but we know it's not good practice. When we went to use AutoSum earlier, for example, it automatically took all of the cells above, including this empty cell, and included it in the formula. We had to make the adjustment. So you can avoid issues like that by removing the blank rows and instead creating taller rows to create space. Let's start with row 2. We really don't need it. There's nothing in those cells. You can click anywhere in a row and go up to the ribbon with the Home tab selected. Click that Delete drop down. Here's where we went to delete columns. Now we can delete sheet rows. There's nothing in those cells. We're not going to lose any data. Go ahead and click Delete Sheet Rows. There we go. Now everything is pushed up. All of our formulas are automatically adjusted thanks to relative cell addressing. Nothing's changed as far as our data goes, just the location. Notice now that the empty row down below is row 7. A faster way to delete a row is to go right to the marker, in this case 7, right-click, and from the pop-up menu, select Delete. It'll delete the entire row. Again, there was nothing in those cells, so we didn't lose any data. Notice again, the data itself hasn't changed. All of the formulas are adjusted to use the new addresses thanks to relative cell addressing. Now we need to space this out so it's more pleasing to the eye and easier to read. We're going to start up here on the Markers between 1 and 2, you'll see that double-sided arrow now pointing up and down instead. We can click and drag that straight down. Drag it down past location and release. You can see we now have the extra space. Unfortunately, the contents of cell A1 are also lined up on the bottom of the cell, so we don't create space between it and location. To do that, we can change the alignment of the contents here in row 1. Let's click the 1 to select the entire row. This time with the Home tab on the ribbon, we'll go to the alignment group where we see currently selected is bottom align. We can go to top align, click there. Everything moves up to the top of our taller row. That creates space. But it is close to the very top, so we might want to choose the one just to the right here, middle align. Go ahead and select it. That looks good. It's centered vertically in between the top and bottom of the row, which is much taller because we made it taller, and it creates the extra space between the top of our worksheet as well as the next row, row 2. Just click anywhere down below to deselect, and you can see it's getting easier to read already. The other labels and rows that might need some space are 7 and 8. Should probably separate all of the data from the totals and the taxes. So in this case, we're going to go to the separator between row 7 and 8. When you see that double arrow, click and drag straight down. Let's go down a full row's worth and release. You can see we've made row 7 taller, but everything else gets pushed down to create that space. We don't have any empty rows, but we have the same effect, spreading things out, making it easier to read and more pleasing to the eye. Now, just as we can delete rows and columns, we can insert them as well. For example, if we had a new location we wanted to add and we wanted it between Europe and India, we could go to the 5 here, the marker for row 5, right-click, and instead of delete, you could click insert. Insert's a new blank row right above, where we could type in the new location and the data. We don't have another location to add, so let's go back to the 5, right-click, and choose delete to remove that extra row. Click anywhere in your background to deselect, and you can see pretty much looks like it did when we started, but without all of the blank rows and in the previous movie, those blank columns that could cause problems down the road when working with formulas. It's best practice to have 0 blank columns and rows and instead create the space the way we have using these techniques. As you continue to work with Excel here in Microsoft 365, building your own workbooks, there may come a time when you have so much data that it may not fit on all of the rows you can see on one screen or all of the columns, and you'll need to start scrolling up and down or left and right to see data that's out of view. In that case, you'll always want to be able to see the labels. For example, if you have labels like we do down the left-hand column or near the top. That way, when you scroll, you'll always know what you're looking at when viewing that data that's off the screen. Well, in that case, you're going to need to know this very handy feature I think every Excel user needs to know about. It's called freeze panes. It's what we're going to explore in this movie as we continue working with our Globe Bank Projected Revenues workbook, Globe Bank PR 0205 if you're catching up. Now, we don't have enough data to go past the right-hand side of our screen or down past the bottom, but we can simulate that using a zoom level. Down below in the bottom right corner, you'll see the zoom slider set currently to the default 100%. But if we click the plus sign to the right, we can bump that zoom level up in 10% increments with each click. Let's bump it all the way up to 150. Suddenly, you can see things are getting cut off on the left-hand side, and we need to use this scroll bar at the bottom to click and drag it across to see the different locations. Same thing if we scroll down now. Eventually, we're looking at numbers, but we have no idea where those numbers belong. What locations, for example, and what are we looking at here? Are these totals or what? Well, we would have to scroll back to the left to see the labels. Oh, okay, it's totals and taxes. We would have to scroll up to see the different months of the year. A better option is to freeze those so that we always can see them. And to do that, we go to the cell where we want the frozen panes to begin. In our case, it's cell B3. When we click here and set up the panes to be frozen, we'll always be able to see what's above and to the left. In this case, it's column A, and rows 1 and 2 will always be visible. So from here, go up to the View tab on the ribbon, and over here to the right, you'll see Freeze Panes. It's a drop-down arrow. Give it a click. There are some things we can do. We can freeze the first column. That would work out nicely. And we could freeze the top row. Well, that would only show us our title and not the location and the labels for the various months of the year. So in our case, we want to be able to do both, but have some flexibility, and that's where Freeze Panes comes in. Click there, and now you can see some gray lines showing us in between columns A and B, and between rows 2 and 3, we have frozen on those locations. That means if we scroll off to the right with our scroll bar, notice we can always see column A. So we always know what location we're looking at and that these are totals and taxes. Same thing if we scroll down now. We can't scroll past the first 2 rows. They stay visible at all times. So now if we wanted to know what the values are for the taxes in August, we can see taxes here in row 8, and we can always see the labels across the top thanks to the frozen panes that we set for column I. All right, let's scroll all the way back to the left and all the way up. That's a very handy feature that will be very helpful when it comes to those larger worksheets you create where you can't view all of your data on one screen. Let's zoom back out now. Let's click the minus sign on the zoom slider a number of times till we get back to 100%. In our case, we don't need to freeze panes, at least not at this point. So with our spreadsheet in view with those gray lines showing us where the panes are frozen, when we go to the Freeze Panes drop-down button now and click, you're going to see Unfreeze Panes at the top, which will unlock all the rows and columns above and to the left of our currently selected cell. So when we click Unfreeze Panes, those shaded lines disappear, and we're now working with unfrozen panes, meaning once we get data that goes off to the right or too far down that we can't see it all on one screen, we might want to bring back that Freeze Panes option, a very handy feature in Excel, especially when working with lots of data. When looking at numerical data in a worksheet, such as what we've created here with our GlobeBank projected revenues, it might be difficult to pick up on things like ratios or trends that might be happening. In that case, we want a visual representation of our data. It's called a chart. And there's a feature here in Excel in Microsoft 365 that will show you recommended charts for the data you've selected, taking some of the guesswork out of which chart you should be using. That's what we're going to explore with our GlobeBank Inc. Projected Revenues Workbook, GlobeBank PR0206 if you are catching up. Let's say we wanted to see what's going on in the USA for the first quarter. Well, in that case, we can select the data, including the labels. So starting at A2, go across to March and down 1 row. So all we're looking at is the USA data for the first quarter. Now we're going to go to the Insert tab here on the ribbon where you'll find a Charts group. Now there are many different kinds of charts we can choose from, but which one is the right one? Well, we can narrow it down by going to Recommended Charts. Click there, and the pop-up window will show recommended charts for the data we've selected. You can see clustered column, there's a line chart, there's a pie graph, and you can see some other options down below. And I'm thinking this pie, if we select it, we can read about it to show proportions of a whole. Okay, that looks good. Click OK. And we see the USA pie chart created for us right there in the middle of our screen. The data that's being used is highlighted over here on the left-hand side. You can see the labels that get created, including USA, because we included the location and those monthly labels in the data we selected. All right, just click in the background and there's your chart. You can click and drag to move it around. You can size it down. There's a lot of different formatting options with chart styles, but we're going to hit the delete key on our keyboard. Go ahead to remove that chart and try a different type. This time we're going to select multiple locations. So we'll start from A2. We'll go across to March for the first quarter, but get all of those locations. And now go back to Insert and Recommended Charts. Click there. Now the pop-up shows us some different options. You can see clustered columns. You can see some stacked options, some bar charts. Well, let's go with this very top one here, the clustered column. Select it, and let's see what gets created when we click OK. Well, you can see Jan, Feb, Mar. There's the different locations. All those labels are there. We don't have a chart title, but we see the default color codes and up above a number of different chart styles to choose from. Click the drop-down arrow up here if you want to start with changing up the look. Just hover over these to see the different options or styles to choose from. And when you find one that you like this last one, Style 14, which creates kind of a 3D look with some shadowing, clicking it will apply it to your chart. Now, if we wanted to, we could move this down below our data. We can scroll down so we can see the handles. Let's go to the top right corner, and when we click and drag straight down, you can see we're making it shorter. And if we want wider chart, by manipulating those handles. That fits on one screen now. The only thing that needs fixing is the chart title. So let's double click there. Double click again to select contents, or click and drag. In this case, we have more than one word, so click and drag right over all of the text so we can type over it. Projected revenues. We'll leave a dash and type in Q1, like so. Now click in the background to see the end result. Kind of cool. Again, we can click anywhere inside and drag to move it around to line it up. We can size it. I like to go to the corners because we can change the width and the height simultaneously. I'm going to go a little bit wider and release. Click in the background to see the end result. How quick and easy was that to get a visual representation of some of the data in our worksheet? When we're finished formatting our charts, we can go up here to the right-hand side, click the close button to close up that pane to see the end result clearly. So remember, recommended charts will give you a list of charts that will work with the data that you've selected. So you're never going to choose the wrong chart, but there may be different options for that data and, of course, a number of different formatting options to make it look exactly the way you want. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is taking the world by storm, and AI in Microsoft 365 is no exception. It's called Copilot here, and it's like having your own personal advisor as you work with the various Microsoft 365 apps, including, of course, Excel. And that's what we're going to explore in this movie. Now, although Copilot currently does not come with every level of Microsoft 365 subscription, it's worth looking at how it can help here in Excel. So if you have access to Copilot with your subscription, which is typically an enterprise level account used by small to large organizations, you'll see a button up here in the very far right end of the ribbon with the Home tab selected. And if you see it there, you can follow along with me as we continue working with our Globe Bank Projected Revenues Workbook, Globe Bank PR 0207 if you're catching up. If you don't see it up there in the top right, just sit back, relax, and watch as we explore some of what Copilot can do here in Excel. To use it, there are some prerequisites. You'll notice right now that it's grayed out. I can't actually select it. And that's because the first thing that must happen is the data we use Copilot with has to reside inside a table. That's how Copilot knows the boundaries of what data to analyze. So we'll take care of that first. It's really quite easy. What we want is the locations. We want all of the months of the year and the data down below in a table. To do that, we select the data first. So click and drag from A2 across and down to M8 and release. That's the data that needs to go into a table, and it's easily done by going to the Insert tab and from that ribbon clicking Table. You can see the range is already there because we selected it first. Our table has headers. It's checked off. Those are the months of the year, the labels like location. Click OK, and it's now in a table. And there's a lot of things we can do with tables, so there are many more advantages than just Copilot to having tables, like these filter buttons that we see across the top. You can see the formatting, colored and banded rows. Well, right now, the Table Design tab or ribbon is on display because of that. And we can go to the Table Styles drop-down button and choose a different style than the default. For example, if we want it to look more like with what we started, we go to the very first one, which is None. That's no style. Click there. And you'll see the only difference now, if we click in the background, is that each of our labels across the top has a drop-down filter button. That's how we know this is a table. So we have to select a cell inside the table to be able to use Copilot. If we go back to the Home tab, you'll notice Copilot is still not selectable. That's because there's one other prerequisite. It needs to be stored in the cloud, on your OneDrive, for example. So to do that, it's really quite easy. We go up to the autosave button, which is currently turned off. We're working with a workbook that's stored locally on our own computer. But when we turn this from off to on by clicking it, it's going to take it and move it into the cloud. And we might have a choice. You may have more choices than me. I have my OneDrive for business at Globe Bank. You might have your own personal OneDrive here that you can sign into if you're not already. I'm going to go with my OneDrive at Globe Bank. So it's taking this and moving it into the cloud. I can tell it's in the cloud now because autosave is turned on. I don't need to update changes. That happens for me automatically. And up here, you can see the Save button has the circular arrows indicating it is automatically updated. That's my hint that I'm working with a table in a workbook that's stored in the cloud, the two prerequisites we need to use Copilot. And sure enough, Copilot is now a selectable button. So if you are following along, make sure you click anywhere inside the table, you save to the cloud, and click Copilot. This is going to open up a pane on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, Copilot's like having an advisor that you can ask questions or make requests. First, if we scroll up, you'll see some examples of things that you can learn to work with, like adding columns of formulas and highlighting data, sorting and filtering, and of course, analyzing data as well. Down below, some sample requests or questions you can click, or go down below in the prompt area, click there, and simply type in, or if you're hooked up with a mic, you can even speak your request or question. All right, let's try something simple like add a column that calculates all of the totals for each of the locations. So it might be something like this. Add a column that calculates the total revenue for each location. Now all we do is hit send to send that request to our advisor named Copilot. And you can see Copilot's working on it, analyzing and trying to understand the data in the table. And then it's going to pop up some suggestions. So we'll let it do its thing. All right, it just finished up. And as we scroll up, we can see what it's going to do. It's going to summarize the total revenue for each location by adding up the revenue for all of the months of the year. That's exactly what we want it to do. You can see what it's doing, creating a formula for each of the months of the year. If we want a better explanation of the formula, we can click the expansion arrow. It's going to sum up the values for January to December for each of the locations. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Now, the Insert Column button is actually also a preview button. If we scroll over to the right of column M, that would be the ideal spot for those totals to go. Just hover over Insert Column. You can see it's shaded in the background. That's exactly what we want. So click the button and it gets added just like that. Total revenues. Click anywhere in the table to deselect the highlighted content. And thanks to Copilot, we were able to do that without really knowing how to do it, even though we could have used some of our knowledge to create those sum formulas to total up those numbers. But Copilot did it nice and quickly. All right, let's try another one. Maybe we're having difficulty picking up all of the trends that we see for the various months and locations. So we could simply ask, are there any trends for each location? Let's go into the prompt area, click there. Are there any trends for each location? Question mark. And send. Again, it's going to analyze the data in the table where we have our selected cell. And it's going to provide some options to us here in the Copilot pane on the right-hand side. All right, it's finishing up. And as we scroll up, you can see Well, it looks like we have some correlation here. We can add it to the sheet if we wanted to. There's the explanation. Notice also down below, can we see another insight? There might be more insights. Or maybe we'd like to see all the insights and have them added to the grid. All that means is it's going to create a new sheet down below to put all the insights in, so they keep them separate from our worksheet data that we have been working on throughout this course. So let's choose Add All Insights to Grid. Sure enough, Sheet 2 is created for us. And you can see some insights in their own little windows, different correlations. There's a graph. You can see it's looking at correlations between various locations. Totals always seems to be the largest value. Of course, that makes sense. Down below, some pivot tables as well. And if we want to keep those, we just leave them where they are on Sheet 2. We might want to relabel these, though, so they're better understood. For example, double-click Sheet 2 and just type Insights. Press Enter to lock that in. That means if we double-click Sheet 1, we might call it, how about Revenues? Like so, and press Enter. There's other things we could do, like ask it to show the locations where the total is more than a certain value or less than a certain value to filter out data. Really, the only limit is your imagination. So let's close up the Copilot pane up here in the top right-hand corner. And just to let you know, LinkedIn Learning has a number of courses and videos on Copilot, with more coming all the time. Just feel free to browse the library for Copilot to learn more. Now it's time to share what we've done with others. That's coming up in the next chapter. At some point, you may decide it's time to share your Excel workbook with others, or perhaps part of that workbook. That's what we're going to explore in this movie, beginning with a method that is still popular, although maybe not as popular as it used to be, and that's printing out hard copies. There may be times when you need to print out your workbook, and there are a couple of things to look out for. So that's what we're going to do with our projected revenues here for the Globe Bank that we've been working with. If you've skipped to this movie, need to get caught up, go to the Chapter 3 folder of your exercise files, open up Globe Bank PR 0301. All right, here we have two tabs, Revenues and Insights. We're looking at the Revenues sheet right now. Let's go up to File and click Print. Now, the next thing you'll need to do is select your printer. Click the drop down and you'll see a list of printers to choose from. Your list will definitely look different than mine, but you will see some options to print to OneNote, for example, or print to a PDF. These are just different ways to save it. But if you have a printer hooked up, you might see it on the list. All you have to do is select that printer, and then you'll have access to that printer's properties. Also, what you'll see over here to the right is a preview of what you're looking at. In our case, we are looking at the revenue sheet. And down below, you can see we're going to need 2 pages to print that out. If we click the arrow for the next page, you can see the other half shows up over there. So let's talk about ways we can get this all onto a single sheet. Well, one thing we can do is change it from the orientation that we currently see to turn it on its side. So switching it from portrait to landscape orientation. Over here under settings, you'll see a number of different options, including portrait orientation. Let's change it to landscape. Now, by turning it on its side, it's much wider than it was before. So we're seeing more on the first page, but there is still a little bit, if we click the arrow to go over to the next page, a couple of columns that aren't fitting. So what can we do? Well, we could do things like work with the margins. If we go to normal margins, you'll see the current defaults are 3/4 of an inch all the way around. Click that drop down, and we could go to one of the other presets, something, for example, that's more narrow. You can see we have some wide ones, normal ones, and narrow, where we see on the left and right, it's only 1/4 inch. Let's try that. And you can see we're oh so close to having everything fit on a single page. Click the arrow to the right to see it's just that total revenue column that's not showing up. So we can now go to scaling down at the bottom. And you can see right now the default is no scaling. But if we wanted to fit the sheet on one page, it'll shrink things down. Let's try that and see what happens. Suddenly everything fits. It's a little bit smaller, perhaps a little bit harder to read, but at least it all fits on one sheet of paper, and we won't be wasting a lot of paper, especially if we need to print out multiple copies. If we do, here's where we set the copies. You can use the arrows or you can type in a number like 10, for example. And when you're ready to print to your selected printer, click the print button and off it goes. When you're done, hit the back button to return to working on your workbook. So while printing isn't quite as popular as it used to be, there will be occasions when you will need to get a hard copy or a printout of your worksheets. With a couple of different hints, you might be able to knock down the number of pages required to print it out by scaling, working with margins, and orientation. When it comes to sharing files with others, the most popular option to date remains sending that file as an attachment in an email message. And of course, that's something we can do with Excel here in Microsoft 365. But because we are using Microsoft 365, it's simplified. That's what we're going to explore in this movie with our Globe Bank Projected Revenues Workbook, Globe Bank PR 0302, if you're catching up. To share, we can go to the File menu or go up to the top right corner and click the Share drop-down button and select Share from the top. This will give us some options to upload to the cloud and share a link, but we'll talk about that in the next movie. Instead, if we look down below, there's two options for attaching this file to an email message instead and sending it off. We can attach the Excel workbook, in which case they'll be able to open up their copy of this workbook and work on it in Excel. Or if we just want them viewing the contents, we can convert it to PDF, a read-only format that they can open up, and they don't even need Excel to view the contents. So let's choose Send a PDF. What's really nice is we don't even have to leave Excel. It gets converted to PDF. It's going to be attached to a brand new email message that's created, in my case using Outlook, my default mail application. You can see it's already converted and attached. The subject is the name of the file, and all I have to do is type in who I'm sending it to. So I'm going to send it to a colleague at Globe Bank Inc. So that means I just have to type in her name, like Sophie DuPont. I'm going to hit my tab key, and you can see that name exists in our organization. It's underlined, the full name. I could add email addresses of people outside the organization or add other people to the CC, but for the sake of time, we'll send it to one person. And down below, type in a very short message, FYI. Press return a couple of times and type in Judd, like so. All right, clicking send sends it off without ever having to leave Excel. Now that chime you just heard is actually Sophie receiving it at her end. So let's see what it's like to receive an attached copy. There it is right there at the top of her inbox from Judson Phillips. And you can see it's a PDF file that's attached. There's the FYI. And she can do things with this like click the drop-down arrow to preview it, save it to her OneDrive in the cloud, download it to her computer, and of course, just clicking it will open it up in a preview where she can view the contents. All nice and easy because we're using Microsoft 365, not having to leave Excel to do all of those things like launch a mail application, start a new message, type in who we're sending it to, a subject, and then try to locate the file after we've converted it and attach it. It's all done in one nice, easy step without leaving Excel here in Microsoft 365. So far in this chapter, we've learned how to share a copy of our Excel workbook with others, but there may be times when you actually want to collaborate on the same workbook with others. In that case, you need to save to the cloud and provide access to the file you're actually working on. Even have people working on that file simultaneously. And that's what we're going to explore in this movie as we continue with our Globe Bank Inc. Projected Revenues Workbook, Globe Bank PR 0303, if you're catching up. So the first thing we need to do is get this off of our own computers and into the cloud. We already know from an earlier movie how to do that. We simply go up to autosave where it's currently turned off. By clicking this slider button, we're prompted to store it in the cloud. In other words, move it to one of the locations we have access to. Your list will likely look different than mine. Remember, this is Judson Phillips working for Globe Bank Inc., and he has OneDrive for Business. That's thanks to Globe Bank. But you'll also see options for things like your own personal OneDrive. You might see SharePoint options here and network access. Judson is going to save his or move his workbook to the OneDrive for Business location at Globe Bank. Now, by doing that, some things change up above. We already see the autosave button has remained on, and the save button has that double circular arrow indicating that changes will be updated on the fly. Now, because it's in the cloud, we can give people a link to this file and give them different levels of access. So that's the next step. We're going to go up here to the top right corner and click the Share drop-down button. Notice all of the options are available now, like copying a link to the workbook. This is great if you want to use your own email application and send it off. You'd send a link that people would click to get access. Or maybe you just want them accessing the one sheet you're looking at. Link to this sheet is an option. You can work together in teams and even manage access. Here's where we go after the fact to do things like add people to give them access or remove people, even stop sharing altogether. We'll get to that a little bit later. Right now, we're going to go back up to the top and click Share. Now, because it's in the cloud, the share dialog that opens is going to look a little bit different than it did last time. It's in the cloud. All we have to do is type in who we want to share with, set their access, and if we want, add a message. So in this case, Judson wants to share with a colleague, Sophie DuPont. He starts to type in Sophie, and that's all he needs, SOP, to see that there's only one person at this organization with a first name that starts with SOP. Clicking Sophie adds her to the list. Nothing's happened yet. We haven't given access. We just added her to a list of recipients. If we want to give access to someone outside the organization, we would type in their email address. For example, Karen R. Leslie. She just has an Outlook account. So Outlook.com. And then clicking that name adds her to the list. Look what happens when we add people outside the organization. There's a bit of a warning here. Just a reminder that this person is outside your organization. That might be important if there's any sensitive information in the workbook you're about to share. So in that case, thanks to the reminder, we might think, okay, there is some sensitive info here we don't want Karen to see. So we can click the X to remove people from the list if we've added them in error. All right, so what kind of access is Sophie going to have to this workbook that's now stored in the cloud? Well, by default, as we hover over this little drop-down button, we can see that she'll be able to edit. That means she can open it up, make changes, even while Judson is in there making his own changes. So let's click the drop-down to see the other options. We can make it view only. With Can View, Sophie would be able to view the contents but not make changes to those contents. In other words, she wouldn't be able to collaborate, only look. And if we want her to be able to look, but not even download to her own computer, the third option, can't download, is going to cover that. But we do want to collaborate with Sophie. So choosing Can Edit means we could both be working on this at the very same time. We can add a message. This is optional. Something short and sweet like, please edit as necessary. And all we do now is click Invite. If you prefer to copy the link and then put it into your own email application, you can do it from here as well. But Invite will send it off right from Excel. We don't have to go into Outlook to do that. So you can see the message that we've invited somebody. We can close this message up. And at the other end, Sophie's going to receive a notification. So let's go and see what it's like for Sophie to receive the invitation and the link to the file we're working on. Over in her Outlook, you can see she's received a message from Judson Phillips. And as we scroll down, he has invited her to access a file. There's the file down below, Globe Bank PR 0303. All she has to do is click Open. Now she's using Outlook here online in her browser. Clicking Open opens a new tab in her browser. She doesn't even need to have Excel installed on her computer. It's going to open up using Excel Online. So here, online, she has access to our file. You're going to notice here, for example, there is a cell with initials next to it. As she hovers over JP, she sees that's where Judson Phillips is working. He's busy working in this cell. So she can go elsewhere. For example, she might want to make changes to the locations, selecting a group of cells like A3 to A6, changing the font color perhaps to maybe a nice deep blue, maybe bolded as well. So she's working on this while Judson is working elsewhere in the very same workbook. In fact, even on the same sheet. So if we switch back to Judson, He can see exactly where Sophie's working. Look at this area selected. There's the initials, ST, Sophie DuPont. There's where Judson's working over here in this cell. So we can be busy having multiple people working on the exact same workbook at the same time because we've saved our file to the cloud and granted access via a link. Now, at any time, we can change up who has access and even stop sharing. Remember, we go up here to the Share dropdown and select Manage Access. Here's where we see the current access. So it looks like two people. The two people are the owner, Judson Phillips, and there's Sophie down below. So if we wanted to, we could change the type of access she has by clicking Can Edit and choosing something else. Or we can go back, and if we've decided it's time to stop sharing, there's a link right there to stop sharing this with anyone who's been invited to access this workbook. So we'll go to Stop Sharing, confirm by clicking the Stop Sharing button, and you can see it has not been shared with anyone yet. We can close this up. So if you do need to collaborate with people on a workbook, remember you need to save it to the cloud. Once saved to the cloud, you'll be able to share a link with people to give them full access to make changes or to simply view. You can even prevent them from downloading the file to their own computers, all thanks to cloud computing here in Microsoft 365. Well, congratulations, you've reached the end of this course on learning Excel in Microsoft 365. You now have the foundation of Excel knowledge you need to feel comfortable creating your own spreadsheets and performing some basic calculations and formatting with this powerful spreadsheet program. But if you feel like you're ready to take things to the next level with Excel, LinkedIn Learning has you covered. For example, you can check out Microsoft 365 Excel Essential Training courses that will take you way past the basics we've covered here in Excel, diving deeply into many more of the powerful features and functions. And stay tuned to LinkedIn Learning for more advanced Microsoft 365 Excel courses to get you up to speed with advanced formulas and functions, charts and graphs, pivot tables, and a whole lot more. Thank you so much for watching.